Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumper thoughts won't change if you do this. I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details. www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing dumper thoughts won't change if you do this. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might be wondering what you need to do to change your dumper's thoughts. However, it's just as important to avoid doing things which won't help. In today's podcast, I'm going to discuss 3 things which won't change your dumper's thoughts regarding the breakup. So let's get straight into this. And number 1 is trying to reason with them. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, one of the things you might consider doing is trying to reason with your ex. I mean, in your mind, it makes sense. You're thinking, I'm going to stay as calm as possible, but I'm just going to explain to my ex, I'm going to explain to my dumper why we should be together, why we need to get back together, and why we should never have split up. We were good with one another. We had great times. We will have a great future. So in a dumpy's mind, it makes a lot of sense to try and reason with their ex. You know, they start to think, look, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to be emotional. I'm going to stay as calm as possible, but I'm just going to reason with them. I'm going to send them a message, probably a really long message, explaining my thoughts. Maybe I'll even knock on their door and try and speak with them one-on-one. Possibly I'll give them a call, hope they'll answer. If they don't answer, I'll leave them a long voicemail. Now, why doesn't this work? You're probably thinking, yeah, that sounds wonderful. That sounds an obvious thing. We're not going to get overly emotional, overly stressed. We're not going to argue. We're just going to calmly explain why we should be together, why we worked in the past, and why we will work in the future. Now, unfortunately, this is unlikely to work. This is very unlikely to get your ex back. And the reason for this is you can't reason with somebody who doesn't feel romantic emotional attraction for you. Okay, you can't reason with somebody who doesn't feel the emotion. So let's try and explain this with an analogy. Let's imagine that you are speaking with somebody who says to you, I'm not hungry. Okay, so you're talking with somebody who tells you they are not hungry, and you then say to them, would you like something to eat? Well, guess what? They are very unlikely to eat what you're offering them because they're not hungry. It doesn't matter if you offered them the finest food, cooked by the best chef in the world. It's not going to help. If somebody isn't hungry, they are not going to eat. And if somebody isn't feeling romantic emotional attraction for someone, then they are not going to want to get into a relationship with them. It doesn't matter how much you reason with somebody. It doesn't matter how much you explain why you believe you should be good together, why you worked well in the past, why you believe you will work well in the future. If your former partner, if your dumper doesn't feel a high level of romantic emotional attraction for you at this time, they are very unlikely to accept this suggestion as for why you should be together. They will be seeing you in a romantic perspective as a stranger. It's almost like going out into the street, speaking to a random stranger and saying, would you like to be in a relationship with me? I think we'll be good. Of course, they're going to say no. Now, you might be thinking, well, why are you saying that as an example? That's ridiculous. Of course, my ex knows me. Of course, my ex isn't like a stranger in the street. But what I'm here to tell you is that romantically, emotionally, romantic emotional attraction, they see you as a stranger. And that's probably the best case scenario. You know, when somebody ends a relationship, they will see their dumpy, probably at best as a stranger, and at worst as almost an enemy. Of course, it depends on the type of behavior that you extracted on your ex. You know, if you're somebody who was very negative in regards to coercive control, if he was bullying, if he was behaving in a way which was terrible, then they might see you as an enemy at this time, okay? But if the breakup wasn't anything to do with that kind of thing, if a breakup was because you drifted apart on different paths, for instance, then they won't be thinking of you like that. But they will be thinking of you as almost a stranger romantically, and somebody that they can't imagine at this time that they want to reconnect with. Now, this doesn't mean you can't get your ex back from this position, because if you do everything right, then you stand an excellent opportunity of regrowing romantic emotional attraction in your dumper's mind. And at that point, when they hit the necessary level, the height of romantic emotional attraction that they need to hit, this is when they will likely reach out to you, and you can begin to try to reconnect on stronger foundations. So this is something very important to understand, but just because I'm saying you can't reason with your ex if they dump you, it doesn't mean that in the future they're not going to regrow romantic emotional attraction and that they won't be chasing you. It is very possible, and I see it happen often. However, that involves you doing everything right, and if you want to learn more about this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, please ring the bell for notifications, and check out all of my content where I explain things from different perspectives, angles, and strategies. But for today, we are discussing what things you need to avoid doing because they are unlikely to change your dumper's thoughts. And number one is reason with them. It's just very unlikely to work, so I strongly suggest that if you have been dumped, don't try to reason with your ex. Be respectful, accept the breakup, and move forward on your own journey from there. This will help you towards the possibility of hearing from your ex again if and when they are ready, and also enable you to meet new people as well. Reasoning with an ex is very unlikely to get them back. So now let's move into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about dumper thoughts, which won't change if you do this. And point number 2 is giving them an ultimatum. Now, if you ever give somebody an ultimatum in life, you need to accept the possibility, but you will hear the answer that you didn't want to hear. If you give somebody an ultimatum, you are very unlikely to hear what you want to hear because you're giving them a position that they don't want to be in. If you're giving somebody an ultimatum, the likelihood is it's because you know deep down they are feeling one way, you want them to feel another way, and hence you're almost threatening them with a type of ultimatum. So for example, if you have been dumped and then you say to your former partner, look, if we don't get back together, then I'm going to make sure we go through the courts, and I'm going to make sure I get every single possession, and I'm going to make sure that you end up with nothing. If you say something like that, this is not going to help you get your ex back. This is not going to help your ex think, you know what, this was a mistake. I don't want to split up. I don't want to lose all my possessions. I want to stay with my former partner. Let's get back together. Okay, if this was to work, then do you really want to be with somebody who needs to be threatened with an ultimatum to actually want to be with you? Surely you want to be with somebody who wants to be with you for the right reasons, not because you're threatening them, not because you're giving them an ultimatum. Now, of course, there are plenty of other ultimatums you could have been threatening your ex with. That was just one example. But you get what I'm saying here. You want somebody to want to be with you because they feel a high level of romantic emotional attraction. You want them to be with you because they love you and they want to be in a relationship with you. You don't want them to be with you because you are threatening them. You don't want them to be with you because they see that their life will be worse in other ways if they're not with you, such as financially, as I was suggesting. So although it might be tempting during the heat of a breakup to use all of your frustration, your anger, your bitterness to say something like this, I would say this is unlikely to work. And if it somehow did seem to work, it will only be in the short term, and it will not be for genuine reasons. They will likely get back with you through resentment, and this will eventually manifest itself in them breaking up with you again. That is the likelihood of what would happen. So if you feel angry, if you feel bitter, if you feel all of these negative emotions, then you're not alone. Breakups cause a storm in our mind of pain and anguish. It's very understandable that you are feeling this negativity, but you must try to work through this and reach positivity as quick as possible, because negativity isn't going to help you. It's not going to help you get your ex back. It's not going to help you find somebody better, and it's not going to help you live a fulfilling life. So although it's natural to feel some negativity, you could say it's natural to feel angry and bitter at times. What I'm saying to you is try to work through these feelings as quickly and as naturally as possible. And then you can get out into the other side of positivity where you feel better and you can attract better people into your life, quite possibly your ex again in the future. If you are feeling this negativity, then you might need to consider professional help, but certainly don't act on it. It's one thing feeling bitter, it's another thing acting bitter. You might feel bitter, you might feel angry, you might feel like you want to give your ex an ultimatum. But what I'm telling you is please don't do this, because if you do, it's not going to help your cause, and it's going to make you feel even worse in the long run. Like I said, if you need professional help, this is something you might want to consider to help you work through these emotions as quickly as you can. But of course, every breakup is different, every situation is different. And this is not a race. You will work through your emotions, you will work through your grief at your own pace, in your own way. But if you're feeling negative, make sure you don't act negative. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about dumper thoughts won't change if you do this. And point number 3 is beg them. So if you try to beg your ex to get back with you, this presents yourself as a low value individual. And the problem with this is that you are already seen as a low value individual. So when two people are in a romantic relationship, the likelihood is the scales of value are fairly level. And this is where I believe the most successful romantic relationships take place, when the scales of value are roughly level. Now, for various potential reasons, romantic emotional attraction was lost to the point of where somebody ended the relationship. And at that time, that person became the high value individual because they got what they wanted. And the person who was dumped, the dumpee, became the low value individual because they didn't get what they wanted. Okay, so at the time of a breakup, the dumpee is already low value. If you beg, then you are in this position where you're already low value and then you're behaving even lower value. So this makes you somebody who is extremely low value. And as I've already said, the most successful long-term relationships work when the scales of value are roughly level. And yet you are constantly pushing your ex onto a pedestal, pushing them to be even higher value than they already are, whilst you sink into even lower value. What you're in essence doing is widening the gap between you and your ex. You're widening the gap between you and your ex getting back together. So even though you might feel like begging, even if you feel that you've made mistakes, and look, you are likely to have made mistakes. We're all human. You make mistakes, I make mistakes, your ex make mistakes, we all make mistakes. You probably did make mistakes. But you have to accept the mistakes that you made and make sure you don't make them again. You can't be begging your ex for forgiveness. You can't be saying things such as, I can't live without you. I'm a better person when I'm with you. All of these type of things sound very nice in poetry. They sound very nice in the movies, but they're not going to help you, because they're low value. So it's not about not accepting responsibility for what you've done. I'm not saying don't apologize if you've done something wrong. But what I am saying is, but as the dust settles, stop with the begging, stop with the pleading, stop with the reasoning, stop with all of these things we've been speaking about today, because they're not going to help you. During the breakup, things are going to be said, emotions are going to be running high. But when the dust settles, you've got to relax, you've got to stay stable-minded as you can, and you've got to grow each and every day moving forward with positivity. So if you start begging your ex days, weeks, months, years after the breakup, this is not going to make them feel that you are an attractive person. This is going to make them feel that you are somebody that they want to avoid. They quite possibly might block you. They will try to do everything they can to avoid interactions because they probably will feel very awkward and very unattracted. The only way to get your ex back is for them to regrow romantic emotional attraction, and that is done by you presenting yourself as somebody who is dateable, somebody who is positive, and somebody who doesn't need their ex to move forward with their life. Now, this doesn't mean you send your ex a message saying, look, I don't need you. Again, that is negative behavior. What it does mean is just let the dust settle and do your own thing, implementing my version of the no contact rule, which you can learn more about on my playlist on my YouTube channel entitled the no contact rule. Check it out to familiarize yourself with what I mean. It does differ from some other people's versions of a rule online, and this will give you the best possible chance of trying to get your ex back. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.
Yeah, if you miss your ex, we can help with that. Help you get him back, or we can help find you someone else. Yeah, Vincent Bo, the relationship coach, giving you some insight, bringing you a new approach. DateMe.tips, go and check the site, giving you advice, helping with your love life. Get your ex back, or move to the next. Ain't no sweat, you know Vincent Bo got you. Finding love ain't no problem, yeah. DateMe.tips, check it out now.